Hello? There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy New Year and happy birthday, Bitcoin. Woohoo! So, hi, YouTube, and welcome to the Bitcoin and Open Blockchain Meetup. Boy, these lights are bright. There we go. I'm Hannah. I'm the organizer of the meetup. We also have Ian, which is right here. And Chris, where's Chris? Chris is in the back there. There he is. There's Chris in the back. If anyone has any questions, you can ask myself, Ian, or Chris. I also want to thank our volunteers. We have two volunteers today, Sharon and Dariush, who are helping us sell the raffle tickets, so thank you very much. The raffle tickets go to support Bob, and we have some really awesome raffle prizes today, which I'll show you in a second. So you can buy raffle tickets all the way up until we get to the Q&A portion of today's event. Then we're going to shut it down. So go get yourself a raffle ticket. All right. We work off donations. That's how we keep going, and sponsors, which we'll thank in a second. That is our QR code for Bitcoin donations, and you can go to our website and find lots of other options as well. We're now running a Lightning node, thanks to Bob's CTO, Ian. So you can connect to our Lightning node as well. All that information is up on our website. All right, I want to thank our sponsors for today, Crypto Keystack and Digital Mint. They allow us to throw a really awesome party in a market downturn, so thank you very much for that. All right, we have a code of conduct. Now, because you all are so awesome, we have never even had to think about using this, but I tell you, just so you know, we have standards around here. So it's very, very simple. It's don't be an asshole, and then we're all good. And if you see anyone being an asshole, let us know, and we'll remove them so everyone can continue having a good time. All right, so Happy New Year, everyone. New Year's is just a day on a calendar, but it is an opportunity to pause and reflect. So I paused and reflect on the year that Bob had, and I think we kicked ass. We had 16 different events featuring all of these awesome projects and characters, and so thank you all for being a part of that, and thank you very much to everyone who donated or sponsored or just helped out and supported us in that endeavor. I think we had an awesome year, and I hope 2019 is off to a pretty amazing start, so hopefully it'll be a pretty good year as well. All right, this is our agenda for today. I think we have 4 or 5 people signed up to give lightning talks. If you are one of those people, please head on up and come right over here and wait for lightning talks. We're going to do lightning talks, and then Mr. Lopp is going to do a talk. Then me and him are going to do a bit of a Q&A. There will be opportunity for audience Q&A, but that's happening all the way at the end, so hold on to those questions. After we do all of that, we're going to raffle off our awesome crypto prizes, and then we get to just eat, drink, and hang out with each other. So that should be fun. Here is our awesome crypto prizes. So crypto artist Josie, she has donated a print of her piece of work called Filter. You can buy a raffle ticket for that. Yes, thank you, Josie. You can also win a Crypto Keystack. So thank you, Crypto Keystack. Full disclosure, Crypto Keystack founder Chris is a Bob organizer. And also, thank you, Jameson, who his Casa donated a node for us. So you can also win a Casa node in today's raffle. Woohoo! Let's start our lightning talks. We have one person. I know we have more than that. Where are the lightning talks? We have 2. Are you spur of the moment? Did you sign up? You signed up? Okay, excellent. So we have 3 people. If you're not familiar, a lightning talk is just an opportunity for any of you to come up here and just tell us the projects that you're working on, ask for help with something, recruit people to join your team, whatever the case may be. You do have to have signed up, so no last-minute lightning talks because we have a very busy schedule for today. But you get 2 minutes, and just 2 minutes, and tell us whatever you like, as long as it relates to Bitcoin. All right, I'm going to turn on the timer. Hold on. Or blockchain. Yes, Bitcoin or blockchain. Either one's good. All right. Why don't you come on up? And you get, oh, I have ads on my phone. Okay. You get 2 minutes starting now.
Thank you, Hannah. Hello, everyone, and happy Bitcoin Genesis Day. My name is Brian Cost, and I want to come up and promote a meetup.com group that I started for educating newbies and people who know little to know nothing about Bitcoin and blockchain technology. It's called the North Chicago Cryptocurrency and Blockchain Group. You can find it on meetup.com. And what I'm doing to start out is breaking things down into like 4 classes held on a monthly basis, where the first class is, what is Bitcoin and a blockchain? Second class is, how do I buy cryptocurrency for the first time? Third class is how to buy and sell cryptocurrencies on an exchange. And it's just the nuts and bolts. It's not trading advice. And then the fourth class is pitfalls and risks in the crypto space, AKA, don't make the same mistakes I did. And I'm looking to have this on a rotating basis. And as a supplemental to that, I also have a website, tinycryptoblog.com, where I fill it full of all kinds of resources for people to educate themselves with, whether it's YouTube videos from some reputable channels, news headlines, any other information I think is relevant to the crypto space. And I got a little bit of time, so I think I'll just wrap it up there. Say thank you very much for allowing me to speak. If anyone has any questions, I'll be in the 4th row on the edge, and I'm looking forward to a good talk. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, who's next? Come on up. All right, 2 minutes and go.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Vaughn, and I am thankful for you guys letting me speak up here tonight, and also awesome on the Genesis block 10 years ago. We've come a long way, I think, in 10 years, and we still have many ways to go. And, I think 2019 is seemingly starting to really pick up with technological growth. I can speak well. I'm up here today to talk to you about a platform I'm right now working with and have been for the last year. And, we've encountered a lot of bumps in the road as, we're trying to understand this way of allowing, people to work remotely and trust their work and trust, things that they're doing, and also being able to budget in times of, harsh volatility. And, but through all that, there are a lot of people out there that are really for technology and are continuously developing in that field. And that's what I've been doing. And this past couple months, I've been working on an application to really start putting the control of your user data and your privacy back into your hands. And that's with a messaging application that I just wrapped up a couple days ago. And I'm looking to start testing it with a alpha prototype. It's built off a Signal protocol, and I'm looking to integrate a wallet into there as well, to be able to send payments to your friends as you would a normal conversation. So I'm really hoping to talk to any other developers out there or other people that might be interested in this project. And I'm really excited for 2019 and hope to present again with another lightning talk or presentation in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, come on up. 2 minutes and go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Burns. I'm the CEO and founder of Block Data for Good, a blockchain project that's focusing on the social good sector. I'd like to welcome anyone to join me on this adventure of bringing more social good projects into the blockchain space. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that before I run out of time. But first, I've got 3 things I want to cover. First, a big round of applause to Hannah for organizing this wonderful event. I don't know about you, it's something I've been looking forward to for a long time, so that's the first thing. Second thing is that we all know there's a lack of women and a lack of diversity in general in the blockchain community. So I want to offer my assistance. If anyone has a project that you're working on where you need more women, let me know. I've got tons of great women friends, and they would love to help you with your project. So contact me to get more women in blockchain. The third thing before I drop into Blockchain for Good is buy more raffle tickets. Still selling them, support Bob, buy more raffle tickets. So my last minute, I get to talk about Blockchain for Good. So the Holy Grail, I've been in the nonprofit sector for over 20 years. The Holy Grail for the nonprofit sector is measuring impact. We all want to know that the nonprofit we're supporting is having a positive impact. But before we can measure impact, we have to know all of the inputs that created a specific social result that we're looking for. And Block Data for Good is a platform that's going to encourage individuals like you and institutions to donate their data so we can start to capture this really important, actually critical data about where the investments are going in the nonprofit sector. So what Blockchain for Good is a data philanthropy platform where individuals can donate their data in institutions. What it is not is an evaluation and an assessment platform. Somebody else, really smart people are doing that. I'm just collecting the data. Please help. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, and one more. 2 minutes and go.
Okay. Thank you, Hannah, for having this amazing turnout. Honestly, with the price of Bitcoin the way it is and the turnout the way it is here, you can tell that there's good things on the horizon. There is no doubt about it. My name is Josh Hughes. I am a co-founder of cryptomarkets.com. I've been working about a year and a half on this project, and we are right on the cusp of going live. You can check us out. There's a couple bugs in our system, but we're working that out. What we are is a blockchain and crypto business directory. There's a lot of people out here, especially in this room, that are making amazing progress and amazing projects. What we want to do is bring those to the forefront, bring those mainstream. You can post your business, you can post a profile. We have communication that we're in the works. You can post jobs. We want to take all of this and we want to put it live online for the world to see. Thank you guys, and let's have a great night.
Woo, thank you. All right, excellent. So before we get to main event, we have a little bit of a treat here. We had, when we were planning this, we had make this giant list of people that we thought might be fun to have out, and then Mr. Lopp agreed to come hang out with us. Thank you. And so we asked some of the people that we had on that list to record a little greeting for you all. So I'm going to play that, I hope, by pushing this button on this remote, which probably is not going to play nice with Ian's computer, so let's see if it works. It does not. Stand by.
Hello, Bobbers and Bobettes. Greetings from the Mallers family from the farm. Merry Christmas, and most importantly...
Hold on. We're going to turn the volume up for that. Just a second.
Greetings from the Mallers family from the farm. Merry Christmas, and...
Can you all hear me? Whoa. Sorry, I turned the wrong volume up. Can you all hear that video, or should I turn it a little bit louder still? Could anyone hear the video? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play it.
Most importantly, happy 10th birthday to Bitcoin, and happy 3rd birthday to the Bob. I will say our first presenter at the first Bob workshop was Jack Mallers, which is cool, where he presented the 21 Bitcoin computer, and was that what it was called? Yeah. And the project he'd made on that, and he's moved on a little bit from that. Yeah, with Under. He's moved on a bit with the Zap project and a lot of other things cooking. Anyway, you guys, we're thinking of you, and we'll see you when we come back to Chicago. Take care.
Woo-hoo. Hi, everyone. In case you don't know me, I'm Pamela Morgan. I'm one of the founders of the Bob Meetup. I, along with Bitcoin Mom, started this meetup in January of 2016, and wow, has it grown. I wish I could be there with you today to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Bitcoin, but hopefully sending you a little bit of green makes things a little bit better, and I hope to see you sometime this year. Have a great time, have a great celebration, and to the moon.
Happy birthday, Bitcoin, and happy birthday to all you Bitcoin lovers at the BOB out in Chicago. I wish I could be there with you, but I'm sure I'll see you all again soon. Hope you're enjoying Bitcoin's 10th birthday, and I love you guys. Party on and keep the hope alive. Peace.
Hi, Chicago Bitcoiners. I am so excited to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the launch of the Bitcoin Network with all of you. It's crazy to think that we've accomplished so much in the last 10 years, and it's crazy to think about how far we still have to go. But I am so thrilled that each and every one of you has been making contributions to our ecosystem by talking about Bitcoin, by holding it, by believing in it, and by asking the hard questions about the role that money, society, politics, economics, markets play in the future of our world. Happy birthday, Bitcoin! Woo!
Hey everyone, Surrender over here, wishing Bitcoin a happy 10th birthday and hoping you guys keep up the great work.
Hi guys, Jameson here. Wanted to say hi to the Chicago blockchain community, the Bitcoin and blockchain, I think, Bob, whatever it is. Anyway, thank you guys for hosting me over the summer. It was a blast. You guys are one of the biggest Bitcoin meetups out there, along with maybe like the New York BitDevs and San Francisco BitDevs. One of the best communities I've been around. I really enjoyed being with you guys when I was there. I can't believe it's been 10 years, right? Like, very few people knew it at the beginning, and 10 years means that from a Lindy effect perspective, that there's a high probability that it will last at least another 10 years. So happy 10 years. Glad to have been a part of, your community at least for a little bit, and hope you guys thrive, right? This song is done.
Hi, fellow Bitcoiners in Chicago. Hope you're having a blast and celebrating what has been done and built in the 10 years that passed. But let's remind ourselves that 2019 should be another year where we really roll up our sleeves and build up Bitcoin into a usable, secure, and healthy big ecosystem, fully featured ecosystem, because we are at war. We are at war for personal freedom, for a life without surveillance, and for a life where we could transact with anyone as we see fit. And Bitcoin is a tool for that. And remember, in the madhouse, you will know the same, for they have the keys. Peace.
Hi, Chicago. Thank you again for inviting me. Sadly, I couldn't make it because who comes up with the idea of launching global cryptocurrency 3 days after New Year? I didn't get against Chicago family stuff. But I still hope you all enjoy the party and have fun. Bye.
Good morning, Bitcoins. Happy birthday, Bitcoins. I hear it's been over 10 years, but you don't look a day over 5. Shout out to the Chicago Bitcoin and Open Blockchain Meetup, Bob. Bitcoin doesn't say much, but it thanks you for your support. Here's to 10 and many more great years. Bye-bye.
Right. So that was a bit of fun. It was a bit of fun pestering people for those videos, so that was good. All right. I think if I remember my slides right. We got it? Next slide. All right, we are on to our main event. I think most of you are familiar with Jameson's work, but for the benefit of the noobs and just for dramatic effect, I will read off his resume for you anyhow. Jameson is a cypherpunk who enjoys building tech that empowers individuals, which is super awesome. Good work. He's also recently become the CTO of CASA, so congrats. CASA, I'll let you explain what they do. I won't try and do it, but you can win yourself a CASA node if you go buy some raffle tickets. He's also the founder of Mensa's Bitcoin Special Interest Group, which I have yet to be invited to. I think maybe I'm a little bit insulted. He's also the founder of the Triangle Bitcoin and Business Meetup and several other open source projects, and he is passionate about sharing his expertise in tech knowledge and his knowledge about privacy and security, which he is going to do now. Please welcome Jameson.
Good evening, Bob. Let's see if my technology works. Yes. All right. So yeah, I'm here to share my perspective of these past several years, mainly because I have been focused on Bitcoin and crypto from the security standpoint, trying to help people secure their own private keys for a number of years now. And as some of the previous people in the videos alluded to, like, we still have a lot of work to do. So, you know, I still have nightmares from some of the things that I see in my day-to-day work. And I'm going to go through a number of particularly unsettling events that have happened over the course of Bitcoin's history. And unfortunately, I can't tell you everything that I have seen due to various NDAs that I'm under, but I will go over a number of the publicly known events. And the main thesis that I'm trying to get to tonight is that if Bitcoin can survive all of these things for 10 years, then I think we have a very strong number of data points that show that it really is an anti-fragile system, that all of these shocks can happen, and Bitcoin as a whole, as a system, can in fact react and evolve and become better. If you have seen Andreas Antonopoulos's fairly famous sewer rat and bubble boy talk, then this is going to be somewhat reminiscent of that, but just going into a lot more specifics. So as for myself and what I do, for about 3 years, I was running infrastructure at BitGo, which was a multi-sig enterprise security provider that helped a lot of exchanges and payment processors secure their crypto assets. And then for the past year or so, I've been at CASA. And at CASA, our primary mission is to help empower individuals to help bring self-sovereignty into the mainstream. And it's a very broad mission, and we're going to be trying to attack that from a number of different perspectives. We currently have two different products. One of them is a multi-signature vault, which is backed by various hardware devices in different locations to try to allow for normal people to be better than bank level security and have a level of security and redundancy on their crypto assets that is normally very difficult to achieve from a technical standpoint. But we're trying to make these things as easy as possible for people to use. Then approaching kind of from the other standpoint, we have this node device. And right now this is more for probably hobbyists. Lightning is still a very reckless thing. I'll get into that later as well. But we are trying to take something else within the ecosystem that has historically been fairly difficult, which is running, maintaining, and actually making use of running a full node on these networks. And we want to make this, you know, as plug and play as possible. A seamless, almost Apple-like user experience is what I think that in general, the crypto ecosystem should be aiming for if we really do want to get mainstream adoption for these things. So Bitcoin has a long history of failures. And this was a report from Chainalysis a year or so ago, which was estimating that over 4 million Bitcoins have been permanently lost or destroyed, and over 2 million have been stolen in any number of different ways. And these numbers are mostly based on large-scale public events that are well-known or things that could be easily seen from blockchain analysis. I would suspect that the real numbers are probably a lot higher because I think there have been quite a few individuals who have lost or had stolen small amounts that they either didn't publicize or were just not large enough to be newsworthy. So, going way back to the early days, what was it like if you were using Bitcoin before we had all the great technology that we've built on top of it lately? Well, in the early days, you would go download Bitcoin Core and it would start generating addresses for you. And you'd think, okay, this is great, I'm receiving money, I'm sending money, yada, yada, yada. But back in the day, we didn't have hierarchical deterministic wallets. Rather, these wallets were just creating random pools of public-private key pairs. And Bitcoin Core would create 100 of those. And once you used up that 100, it would start creating more and fill up the pool. Now, this was not something that was well documented. It was not something that the average user who was looking at their Bitcoin Core wallet would realize. And so what happened to quite a few people is they would be using Bitcoin for days, weeks, months, and once they got past that point, they were actually operating in an extreme danger red zone where they did not have a backup of their data, even if they had backed up the wallet when they originally created it. So this resulted in losses to a lot of people, but probably the biggest and most well-publicized was one where about 9,000 Bitcoin was lost for a guy who went by the alias of Stone Man. Now, this was only $500 at the time, but I know this happened to quite a few other people because they would have some sort of data loss event, and they'd be like, okay, I have a backup of my wallet, and they'd go retrieve that backup, load it up, and it would say 0 Bitcoins. So these days, we have this great thing called HD wallets, hierarchical deterministic, and it just has a single seed phrase, and as long as you have that seed phrase around, it can deterministically generate basically an infinite number of public-private key pairs for you so that you never have to worry about making multiple backups. Also, fee failures. I have witnessed this happen firsthand. In fact, one of these dots on here was due to a BitGo bug. We had some old wallet recovery software that wasn't very well maintained, and a user ended up hitting a bug that was actually in a very old version of the Bitcoin JavaScript library. Just some overflow operation that resulted in their fee for their very large 120 Bitcoin send, resulting in 80 Bitcoins of that going to the fee, the transaction fee, which was collected by the miner. Now, why is this such a common thing? From a technical level, it's because the fee in a Bitcoin transaction is not actually a value in the transaction data itself. Rather, it is implied. You have inputs going into the transaction with certain values, and you have outputs coming out of the transaction, and the fee is just the difference between those two things. So if your wallet software is not doing the math, if it's not running a full node that's getting all of this data and looking at those values, it's very easy for you to screw up and not check that the implied fee that's left over is a sane amount. These days, there are nodes and other software that have a lot of sanity checks that will actually reject what they call absurd transaction fees. But if you are another reckless individual who's doing stuff on the command line, basically creating raw transactions, this is one of those low-level things that you have to worry about. And at even higher level, one thing that I think a lot of people don't appreciate about Bitcoin and really any UTXO-based cryptocurrency is that when you create a transaction, you're actually destroying your money. You're taking the UTXOs that are in the wallet and you're consuming them, you're unlocking whatever script is keeping them locked, and then you're moving them to some new UTXOs, locking them up again. And there are so many different things that can go wrong during that process that it's kind of funny when I see people talking about being safe by doing a small test transaction to a certain service, because they're actually destroying and recreating their money multiple times when they're doing that. But it's not obvious if you don't know everything that's going on in multiple layers of the protocol.
So on here at the very bottom, these are $1,000 transaction fees. In the middle, it's $10,000 transaction fees. And at the very top, there's at least one transaction that paid $100,000 in transaction fees, which even at the peak of the mania cycle last year was probably overpaying a little bit. And also, I'm not a cryptographer, so I can't explain how like all of the elliptic curve cryptography works, but there's yet another issue that can happen very low level creating these signatures where you need to input some sources of randomness and entropy when you're actually creating the transactions. And if you end up reusing these numbers and they're not random anymore, it's possible for individuals who know what they're doing to take that R value and basically reverse engineer your private key from looking at your various transactions. There were at least 3 different incidents over the years that resulted in a fair number of Bitcoins being stolen. One of them was a problem with Android's operating system. 2 of them were actually issues with blockchain.info. The nice thing about the blockchain.info incidents is that there was a white hat hacker by the name of Joho who was for some reason obsessed with watching this type of activity and nice enough to scoop these funds up for people and get them back to their rightful owners with the help of the blockchain.info admins. So most of those stories actually ended well, unlike a lot of other things that I'm talking about. Now, if you were around for the advent of brain wallets a number of years ago, this was a really exciting time because we were thinking about the idea of capital controls and how if you're going through an airport or crossing over a border, then there's agents who are going to be asking you, are you carrying more than $10,000 worth of currency or more than certain value of some other asset? Because they want to control all the flow of money and value and be able to tax as much of it as they can. But of course, in some regimes, they're a lot more strict about that, and people living under particularly repressive governments and those who are living in areas that have, say, hyperinflation may have much greater incentive for trying to sort of expatriate their assets. So this creates a challenge for people. If you can't do it via the banks because the banks are all under the thumb of governments and regulators, and you can't really do it physically because you're basically going to be searched whenever you're crossing over these borders, how awesome would it be if you can hold an arbitrary amount of value in your brain? Because the government hasn't figured out how to scan brains yet as far as we know. So we think it's fairly safe to cross over a border with some sort of secret in your brain, which you can then, download into wallet software at your final destination and convert into some other form of value. That seemed like an amazing new feat of engineering that we could do this. Unfortunately, within a few years, the hacker community determined that there's a slight problem with brain wallets, and that is that meat, or humans as we colloquially call them, is a terrible source of entropy. And people tend to use words and phrases and sentences that they can remember that are very common and therefore have a very low level of entropy. So there was a DEF CON talk a few years ago where this guy basically wrote some software he called Brain Flayer. It took him about a week. And he was able to brute force about 1 trillion different brain wallet combinations with the cost of about $100 worth of Amazon compute time. And he did that and found about 800 Bitcoins over the course of the past few years that were in various brain wallets. Some of them were fairly interesting. The largest one being, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Turns out it's 250 Bitcoins. And of course, down the rabbit hole, had about 85 Bitcoins, which went down it, and who knows where those came out. More interestingly, blank, like literally blank string, empty string,
had 50 Bitcoins in it, and of course it was swiped within about 10 seconds of being put into that wallet. That wallet was like the default brain wallet for one of these brain wallet generator websites, and someone just clicked on the button and then immediately deposited it. So that did not end well for them. Unfortunately, I think brain wallet generators are still out there, so some people may still be using them and losing their money very quickly. Don't use brain wallets. We have hardware wallets. They're much better. Malware. Malware has been around, as long as computer networks have existed. But now, of course, with this new type of financial incentive, we're seeing the rates of malware continue to increase. Malware is, now specifically targeting various crypto, looking for private keys, looking for seed phrases, what have you. And the malware has taken on some new forms. Clipboard malware, something that I had never seen before, is a particularly sneaky type of malware where all it does is wait and it listens to the buffer in your operating system for your copy-paste operations. And if you copy some sort of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency address in there and it recognizes that format, then it's going to flip it on you. It's going to put in another address that has been generated by the attackers that looks very similar, but is actually owned by them. And this actually results in you accidentally sending money to not the intended recipient, and you don't figure that out until a few minutes or a few hours later when the person that you tried to pay asks you, hey, where's my money? Now, obviously, running a secure machine with antivirus, or preferably Linux, because there is not a lot of malware for Linux, is a good way to prevent this. But we did come up with an interesting solution at BitGo. BitGo was in a position where we could refuse to co-sign multi-sig transactions. So we had the ability to sort of inject arbitrary logic. And we basically went around and grabbed all of the clipboard malware that we could find and analyzed it and grabbed all of the addresses out of it and said, okay, all of these addresses belong to assholes, so if someone tries to send to this asshole, don't co-sign it. And we actually managed to save tens of thousands of dollars in Bitcoin from being sent to assholes. Only a small drop in the pond of assholes, but it helps you sleep a little bit better at night. Ransomware, not necessarily directly attacking your crypto, but ransomware has taken on a life of its own because of, once again, the incentives that crypto is changing. Now, ransomware authors have a much easier way to have their software verify that they have received the ransom and therefore unlock. Now, of course, if you have a machine that has all of your private keys on it and you don't have any backups and it gets ransomwared, you have a double incentive to pay for that. But we have seen, at least $3 or $4 million worth of Bitcoin that has been paid to these ransomware authors, and probably untold tens of millions of dollars in sort of IT and structural damage that has been a casualty as a result of there have been like hospital networks and even, I think, law enforcement networks that have been taken down by these things. So it's definitely a wild west in more ways than one as a result of Bitcoin. Reuse passwords, this is, a common cybersecurity problem, but now if a crypto-specific service gets hacked and their password database gets leaked, then you can be sure that those passwords are going to be reused against every other crypto service out there. This is the first of many Mt. Gox failures, by the way. Mt. Gox was a flaming dumpster fire for more reasons than one, and we'll go into those. But it was hacked in early 2011, and the database of passwords was leaked, and they were hashed, they were lightly salted, but if you had a non-complex password, it was apparently fairly easy for people to crack those. So, these things ended up on the dark net, and the databases got leaked, and somebody cracked a bunch of the weaker passwords and then immediately went over to My Bitcoin, which was, I think, some other exchange at the time, and just started trying all the combinations they had and managed to steal 4,000 Bitcoins, only $70,000 at the time. But this really goes to show like why you should never reuse passwords anywhere. Use a password manager that generates long passwords that you don't even know in your own head. Transaction malleability is another issue. It was exploited against a number of services, Mt. Gox being the most prominent because they complained very loudly about it and probably attributed too much of their losses to it. But this is just another protocol quirk where the hash of a transaction is the hash of all of the data inside it, and it's possible to change a little bit of that data and still have the transaction be essentially the same and valid, but change the hash. So if any of you are developers out there, never, ever, ever use a transaction hash as a unique identifier for the hash itself. At BitGo, we had to deal with this way back in the day, and essentially we created our own normalized hash, which we took, we basically stripped out all the signature data and then hashed what was left over. And that was actually ended up being fairly similar to what is happening today with SegWit, where you may have heard that SegWit solves transaction malleability, which is important for Lightning Network. The reason it does that is it takes the signature data out of the part of the transaction that actually gets hashed. So the data that's left cannot be screwed around with without fundamentally changing the transaction. If you want to get really, really technical, it only solves third-party transaction malleability, not first-party transaction malleability, but that tends to be good enough for Lightning Network. Yet another Mt. Gox fail. By the way, Mt. Gox was built on PHP and had so many different holes in it that it was fairly obvious that it was not going to last in the long term. It was actually fairly surprising that it managed to keep coming back after having so many hacks. And unfortunately, this is probably impossible for you to read here, but as I was saying before, when you create a transaction in Bitcoin, you're destroying money and then recreating it. And if you screw up the recreating part, then it's possible for you to permanently lock that money in a way that can never be unlocked. And so you can't read it on here. At the top, though, there's a normal output where you basically have this check signature operation and then you know, has some data to actually check against the signature. Unfortunately, Mt. Gox had a script go wrong, and they created a bunch of outputs that said check sig and equal verify op0. Op0 is basically nothing, empty set, null. And you can't create, you know, a null signature. So it's impossible for anybody to ever redeem, let's see, those 2,600 Bitcoins. Thankfully, once again, that was only $8,000 at the time. Now, if you were around over the past year or so, you probably heard about the cross-chain transfer problem. This became a big issue with the August 1st fork of Bitcoin Cash, but it was a problem before that. Not many people knew about this unless you were running some sort of exchange or processing service that was accepting many different cryptocurrencies. But in fact, there was a problem where at BitGo and at other providers, we were having people send Bitcoin to Litecoin addresses and Litecoin to Bitcoin addresses. And you might be saying, well, Jameson, that's not possible. They have very different address formats. Well, for the standard pay-to-public key hash, that was true. But for multisig, for P2SH, the Litecoin devs pulled down all that code from Bitcoin Core and forgot to change the address format. So the P2SH addresses on Litecoin were the same as Bitcoin. And wallets didn't know the difference. They scanned it. They said, okay, you know, this starts with a 3. It has the right format. You know, the base 58 check all looks good. And so you could go ahead and send it. And you wouldn't notice, once again, until your counterparty or you go to your other wallet and you're like, where'd the money go? Now, this is not as bad as some of the previous problems because technically you can still take those private keys or take that script and put it in some other software that talks to the right blockchain and retrieve it, but it's a huge pain, and a lot of services, a lot of wallets were not set up for that. We had to do a lot of custom work, and only ended up doing it because so many people kept sending money there that it eventually made sense to create a tool for it. This problem actually got exacerbated with the contentious Bitcoin fork, which was a fascinating event in and of itself and had a number of different things result that I don't think anybody predicted. But one of them was that Bitcoin Cash kept all of the same address formats as Bitcoin. However, Bitcoin Cash stripped out all of the SegWit functionality. And due to how the core developers embedded SegWit inside of P2SH, the addresses for SegWit that were mainly being used were the exact same as any other multi-sig address. So what we started seeing is Bitcoin users potentially sending to Bitcoin Cash addresses, but that was okay. We could build a tool that would go and get those private keys and send them back. But then we started seeing Bitcoin Cash users send their Bitcoin Cash to a Bitcoin SegWit address. And this is when we ran into a problem, because Bitcoin Cash doesn't understand SegWit. It doesn't understand those scripts. On the Bitcoin Cash network, the SegWit script basically looks like anyone can spend. And this is non-standard. You could technically create that transaction, but the network is not going to accept it and broadcast it. You basically have to go get a miner to help you. But even if you do, the miner can just take it for themselves. And in fact, we saw within a couple of months, about 500 BCH got swept up by some miner. And I'm not entirely sure what happened to it. I think that they were basically trying to take like a 30% cut if some people wanted to get their money back, but I suspect they ended up keeping up most of it. And of course, eventually Bitcoin Cash updated and changed their address format to a new address format, but I suspect this is still probably happening because they haven't deprecated the old address format. Data loss, I mean, this is a common problem in all computing, but it's interesting to see how even some of the most sophisticated users experience data loss and have general IT issues. Stefan Thomas, who I believe is the creator of Interledger, he backed up his wallet like 3 different times, and yet somehow managed to erase 2 of them and lose the password for the third. So that was 7,000 Bitcoins that are gone. An editor for Wired magazine had a particularly interesting article he posted a year or so ago where he got a Trezor and he put a pin on it and he wrote down the recovery seed and then he went on vacation. And his maid found this scrap of paper with a bunch of random words on it and just threw that away because that was trash. And unfortunately, he came back and he had issues remembering his 6-digit PIN. He was trying every combination that he was using for things. None of them were working. And the most maddening part of it was that every time he tried a PIN, it doubled the amount of time he had to wait to try the next one. And he was very quickly approaching the months-long wait period. But this is actually a very interesting story, and I recommend reading. He talked to Andreas Antonopoulos, who hooked him up with Salim Rashid, who actually got this evil-made exploit that he got him to basically get a memory dump of his seed off of the Trezor. He was just lucky that that exploit came along. Otherwise, he would have lost those 7.5 Bitcoin. And who doesn't know the story of the $100 million Bitcoin hard drive in the landfill? This is another early Bitcoiner who he had a backup of his data, but then I think he was just going through and doing spring cleaning and ended up in the landfill. And by the time he realized it, he ended up having to learn a lot about landfill operation management. And unfortunately has not been able to convince his local authorities to allow him to go digging under that many tons of rubbish. But there was also a large hack in 2011 where this service was running on an Amazon virtual server, And if you're not familiar with AWS, the default configuration, I believe, for the local hard drive, the local data instance on an AWS machine is called ephemeral data store. And if you don't read the documentation, what that means is if that instance gets rebooted, the data's gone. And so this one, I guess they were in Exchange, was running their Exchange on this AWS server, and they rebooted the machine, and it was gone. 17,000 Bitcoin, $250,000. But it also goes the other way. You might want to take a lot of backups, and you're feeling really safe and confident because you know there's no way that you can lose that data. Well, there was actually an exchange called Bitfloor that had a hot wallet, cold wallet set up following best practices, but somehow that cold wallet ended up getting replicated on a bunch of their machines, and it was gone. Another 24,000 Bitcoin, another $250,000. And then, of course, some people don't understand how to secure data, and so they just go paste their private keys or their seed phrases into whatever's convenient. Evernote works until it doesn't. Insider theft is also an issue that we have to deal with. With any custodian, you are trusting that they have internal security practices, that they don't have bad apples in their own company. There was an issue back in 2011, 2012 with Linode, in fact, which was kind of like Amazon, just virtual server provider. And there were 8 or 9 different Bitcoin companies running on this virtual server provider. And we think that one of their administrators at Linode basically decided to go to the dark side, and all of these different Linode servers got compromised pretty much simultaneously. Bitcoinica was one of the largest exchanges at the time, and they lost a lot of money due to that. More recently, 2 years ago, Shapeshift was actually hacked 3 times in I think 1 month or so, kudos to Shapeshift, actually, because they published what I would say is probably the most comprehensive and detailed post-mortem of any Bitcoin hack that I have ever seen in this space. It's a fascinating read. Recommend reading The Looting of the Fox by Eric Voorhees. But essentially, they had an infrastructure guy working at Shapeshift who went bad and put malware on their servers, stole about 300 Bitcoin from their servers, and they were doing the forensic investigation, and the dude was still there in the office, like trying to cover his tracks, deleting logs and deleting other keys. And then, he pulls the old, I'm going out for a cigarette break, I'll be back in an hour trick. And when he didn't come back, they started questioning exactly what happened. And so they actually took down their whole infrastructure because they figured, okay, our inside guy, he knows all the keys to the kingdom, so we need to take down all the infrastructure and rebuild it. And so they did. And then like a week later, they lost, I don't even know, I think it was like a few thousand Ether or something, some other cryptocurrency. And so they're sitting there scratching their head. They're like, well, we completely deleted everything and started over. What happened? And then they actually started communicating with this other hacker who says, I got inside info from your man. He basically, gave me an exploit and some keys to get back into the server. And they, after doing more forensic investigation, realized that not only had this person that they trusted stolen from them, he had actually put malware on his fellow employees' laptops. And that's how he got back into the system after they had, deleted all of their servers and recreated them from scratch. So they actually ended up having 3 separate hacks. And after that, they really had to delete everything and start over from scratch to make sure that they'd gotten rid of all of the malware. A particularly innovative, it's not even a hack of Bitcoin, but somebody managed to get access to this, I think it's a Canadian ISP, and they actually managed to redirect a bunch of miner hash power away from one mining pool and to their own mining pool that they set up. So essentially, for a period of time, I think it was only a few hours, a bunch of miners, they were just hashing away happily, but they weren't hashing on their own mining pool accounts. They were hashing at an attacker's pool account. And this is innovative because this is like an internet level hack. Very hard to do. Should be interesting to see if any more of those happen in the coming years. I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with SIM swapping. This has started to hit a lot of the more well-known people in the space, people who are public figures who probably have a lot of crypto in their various online accounts. We have seen a number of like multi-million-dollar attacks of people basically having their exchange accounts completely drained within a matter of minutes. This is once again very fascinating because it shows the incentives that are changing in the world as a result of crypto. What it's doing is it's exposing vulnerabilities that have already existed in the infrastructure of our communication systems. These are vulnerabilities in the telecommunications providers. It's just there wasn't a huge incentive for anyone to try to steal your phone number before. I mean, what are they going to do? Get your telemarketing calls? I don't know. But now that we're actually directly tying financial value to a phone number, then the phone number itself becomes a point of attack. And so as a result, you should not be using phone-based SMS, SMS-based two-factor authentication. Even more importantly, none of your online accounts should have a recover using phone number option enabled, especially like your Google accounts, your Gmail, what have you. You need for all of these accounts to be segregated, standalone silos that are not connected to your phone number for authentication purposes. And one of the biggest problems that I think we're going to have to keep grappling with for the foreseeable future is that while we can create more secure software, we can create more secure hardware, I don't know how we're going to create more secure brains. So obviously attackers are going to go for the weakest points. And as we've created better cold storage, like hardware storage solutions, it has become more difficult for attackers to just sweep all your money, off your computer or off your web wallet or what have you. But if they can convince you to voluntarily go through all of your authentication and send the money somewhere, then essentially they're just hacking you. They are, social engineering. And we have seen some of the most sophisticated social engineering attacks of all time, I think, as a result of these new incentives. Unfortunately, I can't share all of them with you, but the public ones are certainly interesting. This was in the early days as Canadian Bitcoins Exchange. Basically, their data hosts got socially engineered. Someone claiming to be them said, hey, I need access to the machine, and the data host just handed it right over, and that person, took the wallet off the machine, and that was 150 Bitcoins gone. A more interesting, sophisticated one was actually of BitPay a few years ago, where it wasn't just one point that was attacked. It was actually this guy at Why Bitcoin, which is a Bitcoin magazine. His email got hacked by someone, and then that person used the Why Bitcoin guy to send an email to the CFO of BitPay that had a link with malware in it. And once the CFO of BitPay clicked on that link and got malware, he then took over the CFO of BitPay's email account. Then he waited a few days. It was probably reading all of the CFO's emails to figure out how BitPay operates from a security protocol standpoint. And then from the CFO's account, he sent an email to the CEO, Stephen Pear, which probably followed their standard protocol of saying, I need you to send, 5,000 Bitcoin to this address, for our customer, blah. And Stephen Pear followed the protocol and sent $1.85 million to that address. And the problem here being that email should never be considered a form of authentication. Even, I would say, like a PGP encrypted email should probably not be considered a form of authentication. When you're sending an extremely large amount of value, you really need to do some sort of meat space authentication, at least audio-visual authentication, before blindly sending a bearer asset into the void. Now, interesting thing from a legal standpoint was that BitPay has insurance, and they actually filed a claim for $1 million with their insurance provider, citing this as a loss. They probably had some sort of cybersecurity insurance, but the insurance provider denied that claim because they said, no, this money was sent voluntarily. Nobody actually hacked your system. So definitely read the fine print of your insurance to figure out whether or not it also includes hacking of your brain. It probably doesn't. Phishing, I think a lot of people are aware of this. You definitely should be, because it has affected a lot of regular users. Also hard to read probably, but like if you're searching for blockchain, hopefully Google has cleaned this up. But even I think as recently as last year, I was noticing these fake blockchain wallets were actually showing up in the Google ads. So it would be the very first link. And you go to their website and it looks exactly like blockchain.info. Of course, it's actually something, 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 dash something blockchain.info. And your average unsophisticated user is not going to know the difference. They're going to log in with their credentials, and then within a matter of moments, all of their money is going to be gone. Getting to the really sophisticated attacks, this is on the level of the BGP attack earlier, where I think last year or maybe even late 2017, we saw a new form of phishing attack against Trezor owners. So, like I said, once again, these hardware devices are getting to be really, really secure, so now we have to attack the people instead. Well, somebody managed to, we believe, do a DNS poisoning attack so that you actually could go to wallet.trezor.io, but it would load from another server that was run by the attacker. And the only way you might notice this is if you saw in the very top left that the SSL certificate did not match. But of course, how many people are actually going to realize that? Probably a fairly small percentage. And these attackers, they understood, well, we're probably not even going to be able to get the whole complex Trezor wallet working on our own system. Instead, what we'll just do is we'll scare the user and we'll say that their account is corrupted and they need to go get their recovery seed and plug it in to reinitialize their account. That'll work. Now, I don't remember how many Bitcoin were stolen as a result of this. I think it was at least a few dozen at the time. But this is, once again, one of those like internet level attacks where the only way that you can really counteract it is just through awareness and being careful of checking these certificates when you're going to websites. Now, on to Lightning. The interesting thing about history is that it doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Now, we're helping a lot of people at CASA with our Bitcoin and Lightning nodes and getting them online, and we're learning a lot while we're doing this. And one of the things we're learning is all of the work that still needs to be done to get Lightning to a real mainstream experience. So you may recall there were probably 4 or 5 different slides where I talked about backup issues and data loss issues and whatnot. And this is one of the reasons why Lightning is still very reckless, is that at least for LND, I think Eclair might have good backups, and I'm not sure about C Lightning, but at least for LND, when you create an LND wallet, it'll give you a seed. It's not a BIP39 seed, it's an AE seed. It's this new format specifically used by them. But you might feel like once you have this seed phrase that you are secure, that as long as you have that seed phrase, you can go and you can recover your wallet if something terrible happens. Well, at the moment, that is not correct. The seed phrase for LND can only recover the funds that are not in payment channels, the funds that are on chain and not in these multi-sig payment channels. in order to be able to recover funds that are locked in payment channels, if your node like ceases to exist, is going to require additional information. Hopefully that's coming soon in the next major release of LND. But even going past that, they're going to need to have even more complex types of recovery functionality built in if you want to also be able to recover the exact, like, specific, most recent state of your payment channel. So this is, suffice to say, still ongoing work. There's still a lot that needs to be done in terms of safety rails and making Lightning less reckless. So if you're running a Lightning node, I say treat it like any other hot wallet. Don't put more money in it than you would carry around in your regular wallet on a day-to-day basis. So what do we do to try to move past a lot of these issues? Well, we've improved a lot of the software. Some of these things are fundamental internet architecture issues that may or may not get solved in the near future. Personally, I think that in order for Bitcoin to go mainstream, we need to build enough layers of abstraction on top of it that people don't need to be worrying about private keys or seed phrases or any of this other stuff. It needs to be like using a Facebook type app where a lot of people, especially the kids these days, they're probably getting their phones out and opening up the apps and just, using them intuitively, and they have no idea of all the complex things that are going on under the hood because it's all been abstracted away. So I think seed phrases and private keys are one of these things that we actually need to get rid of. It's because, once again, when you even have a hardware wallet like Trezor or Ledger and you plug it in, the first thing it does is it says, okay, here's your 12 words, your 24 words, and then it says, put it in a safe place. And there's a whole iceberg of gotchas and technical knowledge that are hidden under those words, keep it in a safe place. And we shouldn't have to teach users all of that. It's far too onerous. Very few people are not going to want to go to that extreme level of managing that. And so if you are keeping your keys, there's various ways that people are doing this. Paper wallets have been a popular thing in the early days before hardware wallets. But of course, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with them. They're not particularly robust. But one thing that not many people actually know is that spending off a paper wallet, if you're not spending the entire value, you can easily, once again, accidentally send all your Bitcoin somewhere you didn't mean to. And by that, I mean to a change address that doesn't exist anywhere in a backup. A lot of people have lost money due to sending, part of the money on their paper wallet somewhere, and then the software they loaded it into sends it to a change address that they then don't back up. Metal wallets are definitely better than paper wallets. I did an extensive stress test of many different metal wallets out there. One of the biggest problems that I still have with them is that you need to worry about the physical attacker problem. So I don't like only having your seed phrases on a single metal wallet. I think if you start doing some sort of sharding solution where you're putting pieces of it on multiple wallets, suffice to say, multiple locations, I think, is an important aspect of getting better than bank level security. And now most metal wallets, people are putting seed phrases on, so you're safe against the whole losing money to change address stuff. But some people are just putting a single address on there, so they still have to worry about that. And if any of you are familiar with your co-founder, Pamela Morgan, she deals with this a lot. And we're also dealing with inheritance planning as one of our services at CASA. And this is almost like a paradox because we've created this system that we often tout as trustless. You can operate within this system without having to trust anyone else in the system. And that is certainly true. But then you have to ask yourself,
what happens if I get hit by a truck? If I have trusted literally no one to have access to my funds, then literally no one will have them when I'm gone. And I have heard some interesting arguments for why that would be a good thing. But if you believe in the concept of inheritance, then you might want to figure out a way to create a distributed trust solution where you may not be trusting one single friend or family member, but rather, once again, creating some sort of multi-sig or sharded solution where you are distributing trust amongst a set of people whom you find it highly unlikely would collude against you. So definitely read Pamela Morgan's book about crypto assets and inheritance planning if you have not done that. I actually learned a number of things about it myself because I am not a lawyer. But there's this catch-22 within the system where we are incentivized to proclaim how amazing the system is, to evangelize it, to spend our time and resources working on it and improving it and trying to build it out so that, kind of like Elena said, this is a war for financial freedom, and we have to continue fighting for it. We have to try to use this viral network effect to continue to grow it. But as soon as you get out there, as soon as you start talking about Bitcoin, about crypto assets, especially on social media, then you are putting a signal out there that says, hey, I probably have some of these crypto assets, and I probably don't have bank-level security around them. And so one of my many projects that I have been doing over the past couple of years is trying to catalog as many of these publicized physical attacks against crypto owners. And there does seem to be a correlation between the exchange rate and the number of attacks that are happening, which makes sense because the exchange rate tends to go up when there's a lot of media, a lot of hype, a lot of people learning about these things for the first time. And that means criminals are going to be learning about them as well. And criminals are going to be testing the system. They're going to be testing people's own security setups. Not all criminals are digital criminals. Some of them do prefer to take the more traditional physical $5 wrench attack style. And so as a result, there are people who will have their own physical security tested as a result of that. And as far as I'm aware, I don't know how many total are on here, maybe like 60 or so. I have only seen one documented physical attack against a Bitcoin owner where the Bitcoin owner successfully defended himself. And that was some dude in Florida who has a concealed carry permit, and kudos to him. So what's my point? Don't make yourself a target if you don't have to. I mean, use a pseudonym if you're going to be talking on social media. I guess the quip that I came up with is, the first rule of Bitcoin Club is always talk about Bitcoin. But the second rule of Bitcoin Club is never talk about your Bitcoins. That's when you really become a target. And to emphasize this point, this guy, Cody Brown, early in 2017, he posted on Twitter about one of his friends, I guess, who was having an issue with Coinbase. And for some reason, he decided to say, I trade all of my coins there. And within 48 hours, he was SIM swapped and his Coinbase account was completely wiped out. And he wrote a blog post about this. And I found that interesting because it somewhat struck home with my own physical attack where I got swatted in late 2017. And if you read the blog post that I wrote late last year, where I basically went through the whole timeline of what happened, one of the interesting things that I noted was that I made a tweet at about 8 o'clock in the morning, one morning, where I was like, I'm waking up and I still have to deal with SegWit 2X for the next 2 weeks. And I think it was that tweet that actually resulted in my attacker saying, oh, okay, he's at home, he just got out of bed, I'm going to swat him right now. And it was just, I guess, due to a fluke of my regular paranoia and operational security that I usually delay tweets, that I was actually not at home by the time that I tweeted that. I was already, at the gym working out, and I ran into the police blockade while I was coming back into my neighborhood while they had my house surrounded. And this was, I think, one of the main reasons why nobody actually broke down my door, was because I actually came from outside of the community and I was like, hey guys, that's my house. And we were able to resolve that situation without any harm being caused. So what are you going to do to protect yourself from all of these things? Well, I'll tell you what we do at CASA, and which is certainly reproducible if you have the time and the wherewithal, is use aspects of the protocol, use multi-signature aspects to make sure that there's no single key point of failure that a hacker can use to steal from you. Preferably use multi-device, use multiple different hardware devices, different brands to secure these different sets of private keys. And then finally, multi-location, because that makes it hard both for a physical attacker and it gives you robustness against various natural acts of, fire, flood, what have you, wiping out a significant portion of your key material. And I don't know if we might be able to play a quick video of trying to give you an idea of what we try to visualize with our CASA multi-sig. Is this is a 3 of 5 multi-sig. We show the CASA key shield here. And basically we visualize each of the keys. And with our setup, you actually don't have the seed phrases. You only have the physical devices. And if you need to change one, you just go into the user interface and you say, this key is lost, I need to replace it. You go get a new Trezor or Ledger and you plug it in. And at that point, we can basically walk you through a step-by-step process of doing a key rotation in the software. So in order to do that, you basically need to sweep all of the funds out of your wallet. In order to do that, you need to go get at least 3 other devices, one at a time, and say, I'm going to add a signature from this device. Then you drive to your friend's house, you add a signature for another device, and then maybe you drive to your bank and you go into the safety deposit box and you add a signature from a third device. And at that point, we have basically replaced whatever device has been lost or compromised, and we have, reconstituted your wallet, and you're able to do all of this without ever actually viewing private keys, without ever viewing a seed phrase. All you're doing is following the instructions on the screen and plugging a device into the computer and pressing a button and making sure that the amounts and the addresses are as expected. And it's this type of almost Apple interface that I hope that we see a lot more software in this ecosystem start to be like. I think that's the level of user friendliness that we need for this to really go mainstream. So kind of wrapping up here, hodling is a game of attrition. I've gone over several dozen different disasters, catastrophes, things that have resulted in people losing their money in the system over the years. Those of us that have survived it, I think are in a pretty good position to continue to survive because we've been pretty paranoid. But over the long term, there are people who get into the system and they may lose interest, or the volatility may be too much and they may exit. And they may make some money, they may lose some money. Then there are the long-term hodlers. And I think that the outcome for them is going to be binary. Either you're going to successfully hodl, or you're going to fail. And fail is catastrophe. It is 100% loss. And if you have a 100% loss, you probably don't feel any better if it's because you permanently lost access to it and nobody has the money versus an attacker having the money. It's a 100% loss. It hurts, I would expect, about the same either way. But if you can survive all of these pitfalls, and this is probably not even comprehensive, you know, there are still unknown unknowns out there. But, you know, if we can continue to learn from the mistakes of others in a way, you know, that is anti-fragile, that, yes, you know, there will be some harm, there will be individuals and some small entities that end up having these catastrophic losses. But as long as the rest of us are paying attention and educating each other and continuing to build out the products in a way that continues to mitigate all of these vulnerabilities as they are discovered and exploited, then I think that that is how Bitcoin continues to become stronger, more robust, and enables us to hodl and sleep at night. So I will bid you adieu with the scary security talk, and maybe we can talk about more fun stuff.
Thank you. Hold on, let's scoot the chairs. All right, thank you very much, Jameson. Hold on to your questions. We'll be doing Q&A shortly. Also, pizza will be arriving very soon, so that'll be fun. Well, I'm glad you finished on a bit of a light note, because I think for a while there you successfully scared the shit out of everyone.
Well, that's the best way, I think, to get people to reach the appropriate level of paranoia.
Appropriate level of paranoia, yeah. All right, so questions for you. Let's start right at the beginning and tell me, I have no idea, how did you get into crypto and when did that happen? Like, what's your background? Were you a developer prior to Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I got my computer science degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels, and I had heard about Bitcoin on various forums like Slashdot, and unfortunately I will never remember the first time that I heard about it, because like most people I dismissed it as silly internet money that's going to get hacked and everybody's going to go home crying. And so it wasn't until, you know, the third or fourth or fifth time that it kept coming up on these tech sites that I was like, all right, why hasn't anybody hacked this thing yet? Let me look into it. And that's when I read the white paper, and I was like, holy shit, this is a completely elegant new system. And the concept of money as an open source collaborative project is something that I never imagined would be possible, and is something where the ramifications to having this as an open source project are, you know, I can't even begin to imagine. And you know, that's when I decided that I wanted to learn as much about it. And within, I think, 6 months or a year or so, that's when I started my first open source project, which was a fork of Bitcoin Core called Satoshi, where I was basically taking knowledge that I already had of doing DevOps in a web shop, and I was trying to expose metrics of what was going on inside of the Bitcoin node in a way that was user-friendly, so that the Bitcoin protocol developers who are a lot smarter than I am might be able to benefit from, you know, my own skill set. And, you know, I'm not a C++ developer. I have, you know, some trivial commits to Bitcoin Core, but this was kind of my way of contributing to Bitcoin Core tangentially. And it just so happened that when I first got into Bitcoin, I started talking to one of my cubicle mates at the time. I was like, hey, you ever heard of this Bitcoin thing? And he was like, oh, yeah, man, I'm running altcoin trading bots on BTCE. And I'm like, why have you not told me this? And so, you know, I was lucky that I kind of had a mentor in the early days to help answer a lot of those questions that inevitably arise. And, you know, within that a year or so, I surpassed him because I fell down the rabbit hole, and he kept doing his altcoin trading until like a lot of the arbitrage opportunities went away, and then, you know, he just kept doing his thing.
Yeah.
I went full Bitcoin, and within a couple of years, the venture capital came into the space, and I was like, you know, it's time to go full time.
Cool. So I missed the year. How many years have you been in crypto?
So I first got interested in like late 2012.
Nice. Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, that was also
6.5 years. Or?
Yeah. I've learned so much about so many different industries and I guess areas as a result of this like multidisciplinary ecosystem, but it was sketchy in the early days.
Yes.
I was looking at, you know, buying Linden dollars and using Dwala and all this other stuff. Like,
yes.
how the hell do I get some of these magical internet beans?
I got my first Bitcoin by selling Liberty Reserve and swapping it for Bitcoin.
But yeah, so I ended up doing my first ever wire transfer to some random bank in Japan. And, you know, I walk into my bank and I'm like, I need to do a wire transfer and I have no idea how to do that. And they're like, okay, here are the forms. And they're like, oh, you're sending this internationally? You realize that once it's gone, we can't get it back, right?
It's gone.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna risk it. But thankfully, I never kept any of my money on Mt. Gox.
Very smart. So, in all those years that you've been involved in Bitcoin, what's been the biggest surprise?
Well, I mean, the biggest surprise has been how quickly it has grown. I mean, my biggest surprise is that I'm not crazy. You know, in the early days, I was basically the same as I am now. Like, I would talk to anybody who would listen about Bitcoin, and I would talk to a lot of people who wouldn't listen about Bitcoin. And, you know, a lot of my coworkers back then got really tired of hearing about how, you know, we were going to revolutionize the financial system and all this.
Yes.
And, you know, I gave presentations at my company and at like local software events about this Bitcoin thing.
Yeah.
And most people did not respond very well to it.
Yeah, shout out to my poor husband who put up with years of that for me. So, yeah, and I think a lot of people who got into it pretty early, Bitcoin kind of feels like yours, you know? You have a very strong emotional attachment to it, which is good. I think it motivates a lot of people to keep building things and do more, but sometimes it's a bit of a problem in the community. So when I first got into crypto, I worried a lot about the government trying to shut it down, right? Government's attacking it. At this point, I think we're past that, where they probably couldn't do it, and there's probably not even the political will there to do it. And now what I worry about more is the community, right? Fractions in the community. So I'm wondering, what's your opinion on the current state of the Bitcoin and the crypto community?
You know, the phrase the Bitcoin community or the crypto community is a contentious phrase in and of itself. Especially you go out on crypto Twitter and start talking about quote unquote the community. A lot of people will be like, fuck you, I'm just a Bitcoin user, and the fact that we have a few things in common doesn't make us a community. And, you know, that's fine. I mean, this is an adversarial environment where one of my favorite quips, I guess, was like Taj Dryja, I believe he said, Bitcoin is the money of enemies. It's you know, it is money that enemies can use to basically economically interact with each other because you don't have to trust each other.
Yes.
And so it's particularly interesting, though, when you look at other cryptocurrencies that are built a lot more with a community mindset. You know, I would say, you know, like the Ethereum community is probably more of a community. They tend to put more effort into like being inclusive and going out and getting more people to work on their projects and whatever. Whereas, you know, Bitcoin is more of the like old school cypherpunk anarchist, take it or leave it type of attitude, right? And which one of those is going to end up being the best in the long run? Who knows? I mean, you can even make pretty strong arguments that a Facebook cryptocurrency could easily supersede everything that we've built over the past 10 years. But would that necessarily make it like the top crypto coin? I think a lot of people that are in the space right now would say, no, once again, they can create their own thing, but that has no effect upon us. Like we're completely separate, and unless you follow the same protocol as us, then you're not relevant in our sphere of influence.
Yes, well, I agree. I think my concern is people spending their energy bashing others rather than building. And
that's going to happen, right? There's always going to be trolls and people who are focused on negativity for any number of reasons. I mean, maybe some of them are paid shills. Probably a lot of them are just bored or attention seekers, and they want to get a reaction out of you. And the main thing that I do, because I have to, as a result of having a lot of followers on Twitter, you get a lot of responses to things. You have to moderate, your content, and that's when you start getting into the whole moderation versus censorship debate. But the way I see it is, if I have my social media presence and I'm projecting content out of that, it's voluntary. If people want to follow me, they can subscribe to it, but no one's forced to see it, and they can block me or mute me. And it's a two-way street. It goes the other way as well. If you are sending content to me in some way, you are causing me to spend my time reading it, analyzing it, deciding whether or not to respond to it, and then maybe responding to it. And the people, I'll give people a few chances to do that because, not everybody is insightful 100% of the time. But the people who are constantly stealing my time with low quality content are the ones that I'm going to mute, basically.
Block.
So,
yeah.
There's also a big debate about whether muting or blocking is best, and I actually don't block people. And there are good reasons why you might want to block people for improving the quality of the content of the replies on your stuff. But I don't block people because I feel like I want them to continue to have to basically see my
waste
thoughts.
Their time then, right?
Yeah. Well, now I want them to have to ingest my ideas and stew on them, and maybe that will make them angry and do bad things. But
maybe. All right. So I think we probably all agree that Bitcoin's had a wildly successful first 10 years, right? And it's just sometimes it blows me away how well that it's even still here. It's pretty amazing. So what do you think needs to happen? Or I know what you're focused on is the security work, but not just the security work, what other things need to happen to have the next 10 years be also very successful?
So it's interesting in this space that there are now so many different projects, a lot of moonshot projects, a lot of people doing crazy, way out there ideas that have very, very, low chance of succeeding, but are still very interesting to think about. And meanwhile, I'm still sitting here doing boring old security and usability. I think that security and usability are going to be very important at every aspect of what we're building. All the way, we have pretty good security at the protocol layer, but now we're building all of these other layers on top of the protocol, and they all need to have their own security. There are trade-offs to absolutely every layer of the stack that we're building, and we're still exploring. That's one of the reasons why I don't think that Bitcoin or crypto or any of this is really going to go mainstream in the super near term, because we don't really fully understand what we've built yet. We're still, some people view it as sort of infrastructure building, and we just have people that are building software and experimenting and whatever, but we're also exploring and discovering kind of the potential of what's already out there. I think you see some better examples of this like at the protocol layer, when sometimes like a protocol developer will come out and say, I figured out how to do this thing and add this new functionality, in a way that it doesn't actually technically change the protocol. Like you could have done it all along. And as we continue to build functionality like that and sort of explore the space of possibilities, I think that that's another like exciting aspect of trying to understand, even what are like the best use cases out there. Like I don't think that we've even really explored a lot of the use cases.
Yeah.
I covered a few of them in my like recap article, talking about like data anchoring and stuff like that. But I think that we've barely started to scratch the surface of what Bitcoin as a ledger can even do.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's all a grand experiment, right? Yeah. All right. So one question that I've been waiting to ask you is that, there's been a push on today, Bitcoin's 10-year anniversary, to get people to hold their own keys, right? What's the hashtag, proof of keys or whatever it is. And that's great. And I think it's fantastic to hold your own keys. What I worry about is and you touched on this a little bit in your talk, how does one hold your own keys without becoming a target for robberies, right? And that's something that I worry about a lot in that setup, and there's crazy multi-sig things you can do. What would you tell someone? How do you do that?
Right. So with any sort of security, the first thing you have to decide is what is your threat model. Because if you don't have a threat model, then you may choose a level of security that is way too low or way too high. And so, of course, like the ultimate threat model is, agents of nation states that are trying to get to your crypto keys. So if you start from that level, that level of threat model is like, well, if you have to assume that like basically the entire geography of a certain area is controlled by a government and your no key within that area is safe, then the only logical thing to do is to basically have jurisdictional arbitrage and have multi-sig where the keys are in different countries that are enemies of each other. Now that's the like extreme case
that's a bit intense, yeah.
Where the people who are doing that, I mean, that's like a Zoppo level. We're holding billions of dollars worth of money.
I'm asking this question very selfishly. I'm not Zoppo. Yeah, and I just to publicly state, I'm not at all a Bitcoin millionaire. I'm sorry. No one can come to the party on my yacht because I don't have a yacht.
There's many different things that you can do. I mean, the first thing is don't make yourself a target. Now we're both sitting up here, and are you streaming this on the internet?
Yes, I am.
I don't recall giving permission.
Can I just mention that I have pit bulls and guns?
Yes. So this is and I upset a lot of people on Twitter when I post photos of guns, but it's a signaling mechanism. But also, I post things, and this is true, that I only carry testnet Bitcoins around with me. So if any of you here need any testnet Bitcoins, which, by the way, have no redeemable value, we've actually got a gentleman in the front who got a bunch a while ago. I am happy to let you rob me of my testnet Bitcoins. I am a testnet Bitcoin millionaire. I mined testnet back in the day, and I have like tens of thousands of testnet Bitcoins, and I am happy to give them to anyone who might have any use for them, because that's one of the ways that we build the system. Yes. But like for regular people, what are you going to do? You have to decide who you trust and how much you even want to evangelize the technology. I think that Bitcoin is anti-fragile and it is going to survive and continue to grow without everybody evangelizing it. I think you should only evangelize it if you feel like that is something that you're good at and that you can use to contribute to building out the community. But if that's not something that you're comfortable with or something that you think would actually add value, then don't take the risk. It is, I would actually say, very common amongst the extremely early adopters that a lot of them are ghosts, and they don't talk about Bitcoin to anybody. The people that I know that got into Bitcoin way before I did, who are now basically globetrotters and philanthropists and whatnot, you would never guess. I mean, a number of them are just like white-collar workers, doctors, lawyers, whatever, and they're out there, and they're going about their lives. A lot of them haven't even retired. They could easily retire and buy a private island, but a lot of them, they're living fulfilled lives, and they're just happy to know that they've got their hedge. But it's perfectly possible to use this system without talking about it to anyone else.
It's possible, but hard if you like it. All right, so before we do audience Q&A, I'm going to try and force you to make predictions for the next 10 years. You got anything?
I mean, making predictions is very hard, especially when it's about the future. I definitely don't make price predictions, though I had a tweet get misconstrued as a price prediction, so now my face shows up on a lot of those price prediction charts.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a wishful thinking, which it actually said wishful thinking, which is not a prediction. But anyways,
you don't have to make predictions about price, right? How about adoption or usability or how nation states might react to it?
You know, I did make a prediction a year or so ago where I said I felt like within a few years we would see a country that would move to Bitcoin as their like national currency.
Yeah.
And you know, a country, it's going to be like some tiny island in the middle of nowhere, right? But I do think that like the first tiny nation that may feel like it's like way undervalued and underserved by the United Nations and by the globe in general, those nations actually have a huge incentive to switch to Bitcoin because there's a big first mover advantage there. And it would be extremely interesting to see what would happen if that started to cause a domino effect. There's a lot of people that speculate about what would hyper Bitcoinization actually look like? Will it be a like multi-decade, multi-generational slow grind, or will it be like some fairly sudden event due to a collapse in the global economy?
Yeah, what do you think? I wonder that all the time.
I don't know which one it will be, but I think that either way, that the unfortunate result of hyper Bitcoinization is that a lot of people are going to get hurt, and that I can't think of a way around that, and that there are a lot of people who are rightly upset about the fairness of the system, which starts to get towards some people calling it a Ponzi scheme or whatever. But I guess fairness is in the eye of the beholder. At this point, like Bitcoin is fairly well heard about from a mainstream level. The unfair advantage that early adopters had is that maybe they were like in the crypto world already, or they were computer science people, or crypto anarchists or cypherpunks or whatever. But that was very, very early days, and I mean, it was in mass media as early as 2011, 2012, and
2013. Early 2013 is the first time I heard it on the news. I was blown away. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So that was 5-6 years ago.
Yeah. And now I think most people you talk to, when I tell them what I do for a living, I'm like, "Have you heard of Bitcoin?" They're like, "Yeah, I think I've heard of that." So now most people, I think, know what it is. Kind of. They've heard of it. They don't understand it maybe, but they know what it is. Sure.
Yeah, and you know, once it's not going to go mainstream unless people are using it without understanding it. You know, I think that the vast majority of people eventually will use it and won't understand it, just like people use the internet today and don't understand it.
Right. Yeah. All right. Cool. Are we ready for some Q&A? Anyone got some questions? Ian, would you mind? Huh? Oh, the pizza is here also, so get some pizza. And then if you want to ask a question, Ian's going to have a microphone right up here, so you can come right up here and ask a question. Huh? Do you want to do a break? Okay. All right. We're going to do a 15-minute break for pizza, and then we'll come back for Q&A. we go. All right, we're doing proper Q&A now. Anyone want to do some Q&A? Maybe? We too busy talking? If you have a question for Jameson, please come up to the front and talk to Ian right here. He's got a microphone. Come on up.
Now? And then it should be live.
And as a reminder, just when we finish Q&A, we'll be doing the raffle. So if you bought some raffle tickets, hold on. Some people are going to win some awesome stuff.
Fire away. Okay. For someone who's starting from the very bare bones and wants to one day maybe contribute some way in this space, what's the best thing to do? I was told just study a computer language and start working on Python. Is that a good first start, or is there a better one?
Well, do you have specific things you want to contribute to? Are you talking like protocol or higher level? Do you care?
Don't really care. Protocol, wallets, anything.
Yeah. I'm not a protocol developer. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, I have a few trivial commits in Bitcoin Core. It's usually because I'm doing something in my own fork and I notice something, documentation or testing or whatever. But mostly I work on top of the protocol layer. I build infrastructure. So, for the first 10 years of my life, I was building web applications and doing really back-end data management stuff. And if you've got your web application tier with like your front-end servers and then your back-end servers and databases, like I was usually back here. But now with these new crypto apps and new web application infrastructure, there's another layer underneath all of that, which is the actual nodes. And in many cases, you need some sort of data indexing, data transformation layer between those two things. And so that's where I kind of sit right now. It's like one layer above the actual node where I'm running the nodes, I'm talking to the nodes, but I'm usually just ingesting data and making it available for other pieces of applications. So just getting into this space, having a good high-level working knowledge of Bitcoin is a good start. You don't have to understand cryptography. I don't understand cryptography, and really with any of this stuff of how do I educate myself? I think the best way for people to do it is organically. Is you should follow your heart and follow whatever is most interesting to you. It's because this is a system of anarchy where no one controls the system. There are no project managers in the system. Even in any of these open source repositories, there's no one who is going over the issues of the repository and assigning things to people. It's actually up to you. So the best way to get started, if you know some programming, is to look at the projects and figure out what do they need. Is there a project that has an outstanding issue where they need something, and that's something that you're interested in doing, then you should try to do it. The worst thing that can possibly happen is that you try to do it, and you make a pull request, and it gets rejected, and you feel like it's so bad that you don't even want to try to fix it to the point that it will be accepted. But even I guess higher level than that, if you don't know how to code at all, that's this whole other question that I get asked a lot, and I don't have the best answer to that because I did it the hard way and did 4 years of college and learned it all there. The only thing that I do tell people is that you have to be wary of a lot of these 6 to 8 week coder schools that are supposed to teach you how to code, because what they're going to do is they're going to teach you how to write some web scripting languages, but you're never going to learn the fundamentals of computer science, of data structures and algorithms the things that actually matter when it comes to writing code that is scalable and maintainable and readable. That is what the like really in-depth computer science knowledge is about when it comes to like software engineering. But also, I learned probably more in the first few years that I was out of school than I learned in school when it comes to hands-on collaborative software engineering. They don't really teach that in school. So jumping in there and doing it is really the best way. You just got to get your hands dirty.
Oh, okay. Hello. Oh, wow. Actually, as a side note, too, the first time that I learned about you in the crypto space was that incident day that you mentioned. It's like, oh, okay, this guy's serious business.
Yeah.
And then, as an aside, before I forget, have you ever had 3 Floyd's brain farting? Dark Lord, Russian Imperial Stout.
Say that again?
3 Floyd.
Is this your question?
No, it's 3 Floyd's Russian Imperial Stout. Would you like a bottle?
Sure.
That's a good. Actually.
All right, real question. Sorry, the serious question I had was what Hannah was mentioning earlier as far as like security and government involvement and how it influenced in the crypto space. What sorts of things do you see like upcoming that could affect like legislation or things that might shape how everyday people can interact and get involved in the crypto space, like laws and regulations?
Yeah, the legislation stuff is a little outside of my wheelhouse because I try to stay as far away from politics as possible. But at least from talking to like a bunch of regulators and seeing how they approach a lot of this stuff, they're just trying to protect people. So I was more worried about onerous legislation when we were having the high-profile, large exchange hacks on a regular basis. It seems like that is becoming less frequent. It certainly still happens, but it feels like we're having fewer amateur operations that are controlling huge amounts of money while doing these exchange operations. And at least the people who are dealing with large sums of money seem to be looking back in history and learning from, some of those examples that I talked about, and at least, keeping the vast majority of the funds in cold wallets and offline. So I think the question almost more comes down to, like, what significant catastrophe
And so you're not going to be able to convince all of those people, but you might find a few in each of those.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I like that. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Bing, bing. Hey, it works. I don't know.
All right, microphones are working again, but we're low on time, so we're just going to do the raffle. Who has a raffle ticket? Hey, all right, which one should we start with? All right, let's start with the BTC Pay Server t-shirt. We don't have it here today, but if you want it, we will send it to you. Yeah? All right.
All right.
Ready?
It's this one. All right. That was a test failure of the Jameson random number generator. Let's try this again. Ticket number 331015.
We have a winner? Jeez. All right. Excellent. Well, come up here and give us your info so we can send you this t-shirt. All right, up next, let's do the crypto key stack.
Did you know the crypto key stack can survive a 20-ton press? I have verified this myself.
Let's just do
one microphone. All right. This thing can survive a house fire. It can survive actually greater than 2,000 degree temperatures, sustained heat application. It can survive hydrochloric acid, salt, corrosion, and a 20-ton hydraulic press. So I think that may be sufficient to hide it in the Mariana Trench, if that's your thing. This is going to go to ticket 160008. If you're still here. All right. All right. This is actually my gift, the Casa Bitcoin and Lightning node, with free personal support if it breaks. So this is going to go to ticket 690043. All right, congratulations. Oh, very nice. The crypto filter print by artist Josie. Wouldn't mind having one of those in my house. This is going to go to 232011. Cool.
All right, thank you everyone for coming out, hang out. I think you devoured all the pizza, and I think we probably have a few more drinks. I hope there's some wine left, and I hope I get to talk to all of you very soon. And bye-bye, YouTube. Thank you.